And then an hour and a half later, I was getting ready for my next rehearsal and I was just kind of nauseous. So I'm like, and I talked to my physical therapist and she was like, You got elbowed in the head this weekend. I was like, yeah, but I think it's fine. And she's like, what are your symptoms? I told her my symptoms. She's like, okay, you're not going to the next rehearsal. We're doing a concussion test because I have a feeling that you might have something. So I do the test immediately. Halfway through, I fail it. I am just not, I fail it. I had no idea that it was that bad. And so ABT sent me home, no dance for a week. But yeah, so that's how I got a concussion.
Courtney, welcome to the Ballet Science Podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here today. And to start off, can you just kind of tell us about your ballet journey and what led you to end up at American Ballet Theatre?
Yeah, so my journey is kind of a little different. I did the whole open cattle call process actually to get into ABT, which is pretty rare. I started at Northwest Florida Ballet Academy in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, where I was born and raised. And then I trained all through my elementary, middle school, early high school years there. And then my teacher urged me to go to New York to audition for ABT's studio company in summer intensive. So then I flew up, did the whole cattle call number audition thing. Then from there, I got into the summer intensive. This is when I was 16, I auditioned. Yeah. And then I got invited back up to do a week with the studio company. I didn't get in yet. They just were like, "Oh, come and take another week with us so we can really see you." And then after that week of dancing with them and then staying with my old dance teachers and queens, they were great. They literally chauffeured me around, took me to and fro. I got an email 2 weeks later that I got in, and then I moved my life up here at 17, and I've been here ever since. I got into the main company the year 2016, and then I got promoted to the Corps de Ballet 4 months after I was an apprentice. So it was pretty quick journey for me, and also different because I did the cattle call process, which my year they only took one person outside of the school, so it was it's pretty rare, and now they get them through competitions and stuff. So I do feel really blessed and lucky that I was like good timing. So yeah, so that's how I got an ABT, and I've been here ever since.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah,
congratulations. That is quite an
thanks.
accomplishment for sure.
Thank
Very
you.
interesting. And again, that you did the cattle call route.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is probably less common, especially these days.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Very cool. So, what does a typical week when you're in season look like for you in terms of classes, rehearsals, performances? And so, how do you sort of balance everything?
Yeah, it's definitely a process. So, for example, a performance week is 10:30, usually is company class, then go straight to rehearsals, starting at 11:30 to 5:15. We rehearse, we have tech rehearsals, we just for example, if we're performing, Swan Lake that night, we're usually rehearsing the ballet we're doing the following week. So in the day, I might be doing Don Quixote, but in the evening show at 7:30, I'm doing Swan Lake. So usually we rehearse for until 5:15, dinner break, and then a show at 7:30. And then some days we have two shows. So we have a matinee at 2 p.m. and then an evening show at 7:30, which usually if you're in both shows, you don't have rehearsals. But sometimes if you don't have one of the shows, they'll give you rehearsal. And so, yeah, our performance weeks are pretty crazy. And we work Mondays through Saturdays. So we only have one day off. So it's pretty rigorous. And then our rehearsal weeks are a little different. When we're not performing, we rehearse Tuesdays through Saturdays with, 10, 15 company class. And we end at 7:30. Oh, no, that's a lie. 6:30, sorry. It's been a minute. We've just finished performing, so I'm a little, like, all over the place. So we finish rehearsals at 6:30, um, and we have an hour lunch break usually. But, yeah, it's pretty you get in a rhythm, especially when you're performing a lot during, like, our performance weeks. You kind of or your rehearsals, you learn how to pace yourself, especially because been dancing with ABT a long time now, and I've been through injuries. So I feel like now I have a lot more wisdom in how to pace my body. Some days company class is optional. Some days I don't do company class. I do my own warm up just to, really feel my body, pace myself, especially when you're doing, let's say it's Swan Lake. It's a beast for us women in the core. So really, quick change after quick change after quick change in one show. You have to learn how to like pace yourself because, that's when I think injuries can happen. So yeah, it's pretty rigorous, but you get in a flow, you get in a rhythm, figure it out.
Yeah, that's a very demanding schedule for sure. So I'm sure
Yeah.
it took some time to kind of learn, like you said, what your body needs and maybe doesn't need on certain
Yeah,
days.
for sure.
Speaking of that, so what are some of the things outside of ballet that you do to help stay healthy and performing at your best?
Yeah, I love massages. I get a lot of massages. I do, obviously, I have physical therapy through ABT, but, different sometimes you need exercise or whatnot. I also mental health is very important. So I'd make sure for me, I'm a dancer that really likes to take, time when I'm not at work to really be normal, I guess, or like I say muggle life, like Harry Potter. So I really, going on walks with my dog, going to the park, really making sure I'm outside. Also like knowing when I should rest, knowing when I should, go outside, maybe do an activity, go biking or something. And I really love cross training. I like working out. I have a trainer who's also a dancer. Shout out Cameron. And I've also worked with Katie Bourne, who was also a dancer. So really, strength training, also massage, and also just living life, not thinking about ballet too. I think it's really important. So yeah, those are the things that I do and also acupuncture sometimes. But for me, the needles kind of freak me out sometimes. So I only do that if I really, really am desperate. But that's like not my favorite.
Great. Yes, I love the Muggle life
Yeah.
explanation. I'm
Hmm.
also a huge Harry Potter nerd, so
Yeah.
love
Me
that
too.
analogy. And I've actually spoken on this podcast a lot with different people about how it's so important to balance out sort of your ballet life with your Muggle or normal person
Yeah.
life. And so it's good to hear that you like actively try to do that. I think that's a very healthy approach
Yeah, for sure.
to everything. Great.
Mhm.
So I did see relatively recently on your social media that you shared that you were dealing with a concussion. Can you walk us through what happened with that?
Yeah, it's not funny, but I have to find humor in things because that's how I operate. Um, so yeah, I actually what had happened was my most recent head hit was an accident by my loving boyfriend. I'm telling you, it was pure accident. There was nothing. He was brushing his teeth. I bent over. He didn't know I was behind him. I got elbowed right in my head. And, from that hit, it wasn't that bad. So I was jokingly like, I might have a concussion, like as a joke. Then I went to sleep because I actually had a day that was during the weekend. So I wasn't even working. And then I had the day off the next day. And I remember feeling a little nauseous, but I'm like, I'm fine. I think I'm just, feeling things. Maybe I'm just tired. I just felt a little off, but not to the point where, I was like, oh, maybe I'm just off because I wasn't really dancing. It was a day off for me. But then I went into work on Tuesday and I got on the subway and I was like, whoa, I feel horrible. I was nauseous and I felt like I had a headache. And I'm like, maybe I'm just, I think I'm okay. And I remember, thank goodness, my first rehearsal, I was just sitting down. It wasn't my cast. So I wasn't dancing. Like, I did a warm up and I took my own class because I was kinda feeling off, but I felt fine in my own class. I didn't really notice anything too off, but once I was sitting in that rehearsal, the music I had to put my headphones in because it was so loud. I had major sound sensitivity, light sensitivity. I was trying to sew point shoes, and I remember I couldn't focus on the needle, like, really weird things to the point where I'm like, "Huh, well, this isn't quite normal," but also, like, I have medical anxiety. I'm probably just freaking myself out. I'm fine. um, and then an hour and a half later, I was getting ready for my next rehearsal and I was just kind of nauseous still. I'm like, I was planning on seeing physical therapy actually for a foot thing that was bothering me. So I went to go see PT. I'm like, my foot's bothering me, whatever. Also, like, I've been feeling off. I don't know what's going on. And I talked to my physical therapist, Lindsay, shout out. And she was like, You got elbowed in the head this weekend. I was like, Yeah, but I think it's fine. And she's like, What are your symptoms? I told her my symptoms. She's like, Okay, you're not going to the next rehearsal. We're doing a concussion test because I have a feeling that you might have something. Like, no way, I'm fine. So I do the test immediately, halfway through, I fail it. I am just not I fail it. I had no idea that it was that bad. And then I went and followed up to see a doctor. I went to a doctor later that day just to get a diagnosis officially. And he even was like, "Hey, like, this elbow hit didn't seem that bad. Like, have you been hit before?" And immediately I remember, "Oh my God, if you look on my social media, I got elbowed so hard in my eyeball in rehearsal during our spring season that I was crying. My eye had a cut in my eye, and it was a really hard elbow." And the doctor was like, "You know what I think? I think that specific hit in March lowered your threshold so that when you got elbowed, not that bad again on your head, that it just sent you over the edge to a full concussion." Um, which I was like, "Oh, well, yeah, I guess that does make sense because, they did a concussion test on me too that when that happened in March and I was okay." But, yeah, it just sent me over the edge. And so ABT sent me home, no dance for a week, and then slowly I had to integrate back. I had a whole physical therapy outside of ABT that I went to. It was a whole process, but yeah, so that's how I got a concussion. And I didn't know really. I just thought I was psyching myself out.
Yeah, and it's such a dancer thing, I think, just to be like, "Oh, I'm fine. Like, I can do rehearsal." Like, I feel like we'd be, like, missing a limb and say that sometimes.
Yeah,
So, it
especially
makes
when
sense that you just
it's
brush it off.
right, and especially when it's like these symptoms that aren't like, I'm used to like if my foot, I feel like I'm really aware of my body, like, if something physical, like my arms or limbs, something hurts. But like for me to have like a headache or nausea, I was like, huh, maybe I'm just like, I also get migraines too. So I'm like, maybe this is like something with a migraine. Maybe I didn't eat or like I even had a good breakfast that morning. So I'm like, maybe it's my menstrual cycle. Maybe it's, really I was just kind of I had the only reason why I suspected maybe was because one of my coworkers actually the year before had a major concussion. So I'm like, huh. Like everyone's symptoms are so different, but I'm like, I just feel really off and my eyes had a hard time focusing. So yeah, I definitely the symptoms lasted a while too, but my physical therapy and all of that really helped. I like really took it seriously once I got diagnosed, but it was an interesting journey. Not normal.
Yeah, for sure. Do you remember I know you said you got tested for a concussion. What was the test like? Do you remember what
Yeah.
they looked at?
So my initial test for or the concussion test, it's like called the SCAT-6 test, I believe. So it's just kind of like a protocol that physicians or physical therapists follow kind of to test. It's a lot of memory tests, kind of reciting things backwards, balance with your eyes closed test, which I did really bad at, sort of eye tracking. So, like following your eye, which one of my major symptoms that took a long time was eye tracking. My eyes were not actually my pupils. Later, when I did more intense testing with the physician and whatnot, my pupils weren't equal. I had one bigger than the other. Yeah, so it was quite like that was my main symptom that took a long time was like trying to like being able to follow something and being able to equally, like, see it in my head, which obviously for ballet, major problem because 'cause you're turning, spinning, spotting, like, all of that, just no bueno. So, that was, the main symptom that took a really long time to go away, but, yeah, the SCAT-6 test was my initial. Then I actually went to a concussion specialist, later, who I had like a VR headset where I had to track a red dot. I had all these different like brain. It looked like out of like like I was in a NASA movie or something. It was all this crazy stuff that they hooked me up to. But anyway, that's when they could see that actually it was the right side of my brain that was the injured part because of certain things that I don't even know how they figured it out, to be honest with you. But it was really interesting to see. And the process, like learning that kind of, I'm really fascinated with, I don't want to say injuries, but like, body, when something happens, learning about that part of the body. But like the brain was new for me. So I was like, oh, it's all interesting. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting testing process, but I mean, it paid off obviously for a quick recovery. But yeah, I take them seriously for sure because it's a brain injury, and I didn't, realize how serious they could be, especially until after I saw the doctor. I was like, oh,
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I've never had a concussion, so I can see how if someone's never had one before, it could go you might not even like occur to you that that could be what it is, and just like you
yeah.
said, like, oh, it could be X, Y, or Z instead.
hmm
So, okay, so you got the diagnosis and you said you did a lot of physical therapy. What kinds of things did they have you do in physical therapy?
It was really cool. I went to Concussion Management of New York. They did a really great job, basically helping identify, the where my concussion probably was. A lot of my symptoms also were like fatigue, lack of focus, lack of concentration. I really had also a hard time like staying focused like I normally do. So we did a lot of memories. At first, initially, it's like, I red light therapy, stuff on my neck, because also concussions can affect the neck. Also, as someone that's has migraines, that can make the concussion symptoms a little more intense, which I didn't know either. So we did a lot of like eye tracking, like for example, starting off slow, but like walking on a treadmill with a big TV in front of you, following a red dot as you're walking, trying not to move your head. Them throwing a ball at you while you like have to, you have a letter you're looking at, then you have to think of a country that starts with that letter, and then you're like lots of mind games actually that are like in general, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anyway, but this is lots of brain teaser games, lots of physical like we had reaction tests where they have like these probes around you, and every time you see a certain like letter, you have to swipe in front of it. Reaction time, moving your head while they throw a ball at you, or like while you have to think of like different categories. It was pretty intense. And then they have one where like you're holding like a popsicle stick and you have to walk while moving your head looking at it. Lots of vestibular exercises, especially because was so affected for dance. But as we like progressed my physical therapy, it turned into like me turning while they were throwing stuff at me, me doing like more balletic moves while like they're flashing lights in my eyes. Cause the main concern they had and that my company had, because we had another dancer that had a concussion. She really had a hard time with the lights actually, performing, which I wasn't performing at that point, so we didn't know, but we were already getting prepared for, like, our most recent Met season. They were flashing lights while I was, like, doing reaction stuff with the lights off. We were already kinda getting ready for that, but thankfully, my concussion didn't really get affected too much by the lights per se. It was more so just uh, like tiny eye tracking was mine. Um, but yeah, and also the process was like really slow integration back into rehearsals. Like the first week, I didn't do anything. Second week, I was just sitting down watching, which in itself was kind of like hard sometimes because just being in a room with like lots of movement gave me headaches. So I'd have to leave the room. Then, after another week of like starting to feel better, then introduced me back in the space, not dancing. So, like, for example, like blocking things, doing it very minimally, but that was even and I was like, I just felt so off. I was like, "Whoa." But yeah, it was just a building process back to slowly starting to dance. I started like getting in rehearsals, starting to jump, no turn. So I would like do, rehearsals, but if there was a turn part, I would just not do it. And then, really building up very slowly, mindfully, so that it worked out timing wise that our Met season started in June. that I was, like, pretty much back to where I was, and but that first week of performances, I didn't like, the first 2 shows, they took me out of some stuff just so we could see, like, make sure I'm okay before they put me back and everything, but yeah, I handled everything really well, so then I got the full green light that I'm A-okay. So, yeah, it was definitely a process.
Yeah, it sounds like it, but it sounds like you had an excellent physical therapy program, and
Yeah, it
they
was
were very
great.
thorough, and it sounds like they even tried to be very specific to, like you said, things you do as a
Mhm.
dancer that you would need to kind of work up to, so that's wonderful to hear that
Yeah.
you had that great of a therapy experience. Besides, like, the things they maybe told you to do or not do in ballet, were there any things, like, in your daily life that they suggested, like, "Don't do this until you feel better," or something like that?
Yeah, let me tell you, the first week after my concussion, I couldn't look at any screens, it hurt my head, and I was the most bored I've ever been. I couldn't really, especially I'd go on little walks, but they were like, "Don't go," like, basically, "Don't do anything crazy." So then I'm just home, and so I started listening to audiobooks because I like reading, but I couldn't read because it would hurt. And, like, my doctor said, like, "Well, you can do TV, but really, like, bigger the screen, better. Really don't look at your phone." So I wasn't really, I was kinda just chilling listening to audiobooks for, like, a week with, like, small walks with my dog, but nothing too crazy. But then, like, eventually, going outside the subway also was really hard for me too, just, like, the sound sensitivity I had was insane. I even, like, people walking like, people talking that I had my headphones on the whole time. So those in my normal life and I think also, like, fatigue and lack of concentration was really hard, like, I would be doing a task or, like, doing a chore or something, and then I would totally get, like, sidetracked and then like, memory loss almost. It was really interesting. And also mood swings. Apparently, my loved ones told me I was a little moody, especially the first week. Apparently, it can cause mood swings, so I was a little extra moody, a little sad some days, a little angry, which I'm not an angry person, so the fact that I was a little angry, that was weird for me. So yeah, definitely, and these things I like, that's why I thought it was okay because they were just really weird symptoms that I couldn't really explain, but yeah, now it makes sense.
Yeah, that's all interesting to hear. And I was thinking you live in New York City, and that's sort of like a very stimulating place to be trying to recover from a concussion and avoid noise and lights and sounds. So I'm sure that
Yeah.
was sort of an extra challenge of where you were located at the time,
Yeah, it
to
was
try
kinda
to
rough.
recover. Yeah, I would imagine in the subway, like I feel like that's kind of too much even just when you don't have a concussion sometimes. So yeah,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
interesting. So now that you've recovered, looking back, is there anything you wish you had maybe done differently in those first hours or days after your injury? I know you kind of described that, like, you kind of had two different events that were spaced out
Mhm,
that probably led to this. So it might be harder to pinpoint like the first hours. But I guess
mhm.
just looking back, do you wish you had sort of done anything differently?
You know, I will say I wish after I got hit, the second hit that I had that sent me into the concussion, I wish I kind of went with my gut a little more because in my gut, I'm like, "I think something's wrong because I remember waking up in the middle of the night a little nauseous, but I'm also an anxious girl. So I'm like, maybe it's just in my head. So I kinda wish I went with my gut and, like, went to get it checked out maybe sooner before I went to work and kinda suffered for a little bit. So I will say I wish, yeah, like I said, I wish I went a little sooner, but I will say I'm really happy that I have a really great physical therapy team at ABT specifically that really saw the signs that, I was gonna go to rehearsal and dance all day. So I guess now that I know, I wish I could have, gotten it looked at sooner, gotten everything done sooner, not even, but I have to say the dancing that I did do that day was pretty minimal in what I was going to do for the rest of the day, so I think it all happened how it was meant to happen, but I would say just trusting my gut maybe, being like, "Eh."
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would imagine too, like if the event had happened like at ABT, like in a class or rehearsal, they might have just sent you immediately to a physical therapist to get checked, I would
Yeah, for
imagine. So,
sure.
like, there probably is a protocol for that. But since like you said, it happened, elbow at home, then you just kind of went about your life. It's harder to kind of pinpoint what's going on. But yeah, it
Yeah,
sounds like there's a great team at ABT. So, kudos to them for helping you figure all that
yeah,
out for sure.
for sure.
So, I guess if you were giving advice to another dancer who maybe hit their head in rehearsal and felt okay initially, but maybe there is a concern for a concussion, what would you want them to know based on what you experienced?
Yeah, I think I would tell another dancer that did get their head hit, it's okay to get it checked out. It doesn't mean anything's wrong, but it's always safer to get it looked at and, get the test done. It's literally like it's called the SCAT-6 test. All you need is like a physician to do it, and it's really pretty, simple test. But I would just say, take it a little seriously. I think a lot of us dancers, we normally shrug things off more easily. We have a higher pain tolerance, but I mean, brain injuries are not to be played with, and also the more you push through it, some concussions can last months and months, and I am lucky that I caught mine as early as I did considering, so I would just say it's okay just to get it looked at. It's not gonna mean the end of the world. I think some dancers making it more of a thing, it's a little anxiety inducing for us because we don't wanna miss any sort of opportunities we have, but at the end of the day, our health and our body is the most important. This is what we're gonna be in even after we dance, so we need to take care of it. So I would say definitely, yeah, that.
Yes, that is great advice. And yeah, I think it's important to, yeah, like, so this is your brain, we're talking about. So let's definitely take it seriously. And then another thing you mentioned that I think is an important point, especially for dancers, is, if you do maybe have to sit out for a few weeks or miss a performance or miss a summer intensive or an audition, we can sometimes push through things and maybe it's not the smartest plan to do that. So I'm sure it was difficult for you to kind of sit on the sidelines for a little bit, but it sounds like the timing was kind of maybe okay, like you got to go finish the Met season.
Yeah, it can be hard, and even, like, for me, when I had my concussion, the one thing I thought of was like, "Oh my gosh, am I gonna miss my Met season?" Because, we had like I said, we had another dancer the year before that missed many shows because of it, and I will say, I think I think I'm, like, the first dancer that did, like, this intensive physical therapy program for concussions. I am not most people don't really do that, but I was like, "I wanna be back for Met season, I'm gonna do anything I can." So, I will say the looming kind of sadness that I possibly won't do it was a little, sad, but also at the end of the day, like, I've been through enough to know that, like, ballet is a great job, but it's not, like, everything, and, like, for my own health and well-being, you gotta sometimes we love ballet, we that's a great relationship, but, we need to take care of ourselves, and if that means missing shows, that means missing shows, and that's just how it is. But I think, we also as dancers, it's like, the end of the world when we miss a show, but I think through the years, you've sort of learned, like, I don't wanna go out there and be struggling, suffering, and giving not the best performance. Like, it's better actually at the end of the day to, like, prioritize yourself to do the best you can do physically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sure this has probably changed even, how you approach your own health or injury recovery,
Mhm,
your career going forward, just going through this experience.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a stranger to injuries. I've had, like, 4 knee surgeries, I've had a broken foot, had ankle sprains, so I have been through I've taken a long period off of ballet before, so I think that, after that, you're kind of like really your mindset shifts, and I did that in my early 20s, so I think now that I'm in my late 20s, I'm like, have a more uh, mindful approach because I realize, like, our body, this is our one body, we gotta take care of it. So I think the concussion, it was different for me injury-wise, but also I think I knew pretty early after I saw the doctor, like, this is something, like, I need to really get a handle on.
Yeah, yeah, that you have had a lot of injuries and serious ones, it sounds like,
Mhm,
and that makes sense kind of what you were saying about going through something like that and having to take time off, it kind of changes your perspective on ballet and just life. And that's probably a time when you started to look for other things that you enjoy doing too,
Mhm.
just because you sort of have to sometimes.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of dancers, like, I think especially because we start so young, our whole identity is ballet, and I think it's not great. I really don't love that, and I think the people that have I even the people that I work with, I think it's really clear to see the people that have found their identities not only in ballet, but outside, and I think because when you get injured or something, I don't you really can feel lost and don't know what to do. Who am I? Who am I without ballet? And for me, I was out for almost 2 years, in my early 20s, so I think during, like, the pandemic time and into the end of the pandemic, so I had to find who I was, like Courtney, not the dancer, and I think mentally, like, mental health is so important, like, really knowing that, yeah, ballet, I love doing it, but, like, it's not my whole identity, it's just a part of part of myself. So, yeah, I am really grateful that I got that or I mean, everything happens for a reason, but I'm glad I had that opportunity really young so that now when something happens, I feel like I'm more level-headed and I know I'm not, not the end of the world. Life goes on.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, it's a very healthy mindset to have for sure. So
Mhm.
very good. Well, it sounds like you can with ABT, you had a great experience with the physical therapy and just sort of your concussion recovery. But do you think concussion awareness in the ballet world more generally needs to improve? Like, do you think it's something that's sort of on the radar for dancers or directors or teachers, or like what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say at ABT specifically, I think they have a pretty good awareness. The only thing I think that can improve maybe at least in, like, professional level, is, once the rehab process coming back, because it's an invisible injury, as they call it. I'm not in a boot, I'm not on crutches, I don't have a sling. So it's something that, sometimes people think you're okay, but you're not. So I will say when I was coming back, I really had to advocate for myself. They'd be like, "Oh, can you do this?" I had to say, "No, I'm not there yet." But, sometimes I, I could feel a little hint of like, "You're fine," from some certain people. But I'm also the dancer that I advocate for myself. I'm not gonna, I've been there long enough. However, I think there should be more of a mindful, maybe approach to um, awareness of invisible injuries, I would say, and taking it very slow coming back. But in general, like Susan Jaffe, our therapy department, everybody was very like, take it seriously, don't do anything. And in general, everyone did. But I think certain times when, we're low on people, it's really important that I'm back for rehearsal because they don't have an alternate for me, like things like that, which, at the end of the day, I can only do the best that I can do, and I'm not going to kill myself, you know, coming back to ballet. But I would say just being aware that some injuries are not visible, but there's equally as important. And I will say, actually, in schools too, I think sometimes it can be overlooked. I remember like a girl in Florida hit her head really bad to the point she started like getting sick. And I think people were like, oh, just go home. But like at the end, I'm like looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, she should have gone to the ER, should have gone to the hospital. Uh, so I think in schools there can be definitely more of an awareness of concussions, but I think it's improving slowly. But yeah, I would say that.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, that's such a good point that it's not like you said, you don't come in with a cast or a
Hmm.
boot or a,
Hmm.
bandage even. It's you
Yeah.
can't see it, and so if someone sees you walk in the room, it's like, well, you seem fine. Like, just do
Yeah.
it.
Right.
When really, like you said, there it takes a while to recover. And I
Right.
think too, like people. Concussions are probably people think of concussions more for like football or more contact sports and like well,
Mhm.
ballet, like, how could you get a concussion in ballet? But, and even though, like, you didn't really have, I guess, the final event happen in a studio, but I mean, so often, we're dancing in like a formation or like as a group, and you might be very close to someone, someone might be lifted right next to you, you could very easily get kicked in the head. Or
Yeah.
even if you're doing partnering, like dropped, God forbid. So there are like, when you really stop and think about it, there are lots of ways it could happen.
Yeah.
Um, and
Sure
we don't wear
can.
helmets. So
Yeah, and that's how a lot of people I've seen get concussions actually. Or people get their head hit all the time, and it might not lead to a concussion, but sometimes it does. And I've seen some of my coworkers getting hit, like got hit in the head by a leg because someone was doing a lift, and then they got a concussion. So it happens. Yeah, it's just part of the job. But in general, I think the awareness is getting better, especially because of our physical therapy department. I will say I think they're really great at being more like they're advocating more for us, especially when this happens, which is great. So yeah, invisible injuries are really hard sometimes because unless you have one, like now I really understand my friend that had one last year. I mean, I'm like, whoa, like now I really get it, like what she was feeling with. It's hard to explain. It's a weird feeling. You just feel really off. So I'm really now I have an experience at least that I can have more sympathy with. So yeah,
well, I'm very sorry to hear that you went through all that, but thank you so much for sharing. And I'm sure
yeah,
this will help some people. And it's just interesting to hear about. Again, I've never had a concussion. So it's good to know sort of the warning signs or the symptoms and things. Like if you start to, if you do have some kind of head injury and then
uh,
you experience any of those, like, oh, maybe it's not just, hormones or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing all that.
Yeah.
If listeners want to check out your social media or follow you, I will say you have a very good sense of humor on your social media, and so
Yeah.
I highly recommend people check it out. How can they find you?
Thanks. Yeah, I am, on Instagram, Courtney_Shealy. You can find me also on TikTok, Courtney_Shealy. Yeah, and I like to post pretty real ballet content, some funny stuff, and also some, real content about what we do. So, yeah, that's where I am.
Great. Yes, I love all your sort of behind the scenes ABT videos that usually have a good bit of humor in them too. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy
Thanks.
all
Thank
of
you.
them. Yeah. Well, Courtney,
Thank you.
thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your story with all of us. Enjoy your, I guess, downtime. Now we're on your break for the summer, and good luck next season.
Well, thank you so much. It's so nice to do this, and thanks for having me.